we'll get right to it. We're going to, with these two gentlemen, we're going to take a 60,000-foot view of this dynamic corridor. You know, we're talking about the two largest, most important regions of Wisconsin, and, you know, and everything in between, of course. Waukesha County's growth continues, especially in western Waukesha County. Oconomowoc is growing like crazy. Dane County continues to be the growth leader of Wisconsin, and of course, what's been said about Jefferson County. Exciting emergence there. But with you guys, my first question I want to talk about is, when you think about the importance of the Madison and Milwaukee areas in Wisconsin as economic regions, they haven't always really collaborated. They've operated sort of in their own silos. And with what we're seeing now in this corridor, and seemingly coming together perhaps, when you look at Jefferson County especially, what do you guys think about? Is there a chance now, an opportunity now to have collaboration that we haven't seen before between the Madison and Milwaukee metro areas?
Yeah, the time is now. There's a lot of shared interests that both regions have to play off each other. For example, workforce, supply chain. As we look at how Madison is very tech and research driven, Milwaukee area is very strong in manufacturing, financial services, and logistics. Working better together, especially with two organizations as far as MadREP and the arm of MMAC, M7, that is an effort that we're undertaking to hopefully work better together. In part, obviously having Jefferson County right in the middle of that with the growth that they've experienced.
Yeah.
I was actually hoping we'd stand up, because this is actually remarkable that we have like 3 6'5" and above guys together.
I'm not 6'5". I wish I was.
Really?
We should stand up.
I would have actually played varsity
Your reputation and respect makes you taller, my friend.
Okay.
Very good. So I don't think there's any slight or any intentional, like, hey, we're from Madison and give the stiff arm to Milwaukee, or the other way around. It's just that relationships need intentionality, right? And so if you're not intentional about your business relationships, your personal relationships, and invest time in it, it just doesn't happen. And I believe there's now an intentionality that wasn't there before for many different reasons. And I think there's many organizations that deserve credit for that happening. The most tangible win we just had was the Biotech Hub win, and I congratulate Wendy's here, and I think you're going to hear from her and appreciate her leadership on that front. And also the leadership of Republicans and Democrats and local, state, and federal officials that were all part of that big win for the region, and just saying this makes sense. And why was that intentionally not there is because, just in very general terms, is the Milwaukee community has a lot of manufacturing expertise, and it's a lot of mid-tier manufacturer where these guys and girls wake up at 5 a.m. and they roll in and they're on the factory floor and they work late and they go home and have dinner with the family and then go to like a church consistory or a ball game or something like that. And then the Madison area is like a bunch of researchers and IP, and they're like in the details of getting that grant or whatever it is. And so it takes intentionality. I think that intentionality is there. And I don't want to get too far ahead of all your questions here, but we could talk about why that intentionality should be there and all the reasons that this makes tremendous sense. And we should think of ourselves as one large metro or one giant community. I mean, I was just in Miami for some Army duty, just 36 hours. I got there early enough. I was like, great, I got time to get down to the beach, take it for a run, and I'll get to my hotel. And this was a Miami to Miami trip. And I got in my car, and I plugged in GPS, 19 miles, no problem. 1 hour and 22 minutes. That's actually 2 minutes longer than it takes to get from Milwaukee to Madison. So the opportunity to rethink this, and that's not unique to Miami. In Chicago, same thing. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I remember I had a client, Takeda Pharmaceuticals, on the north side of Chicago, and consistently when I went from the Milwaukee office down to Takeda, I would get the client before our south side Chicago employees from Milwaukee to the north side of Chicago. And so, I think we're blessed with Madison has like the second shortest commute in the nation, or third shortest commute in the nation, and Milwaukee has the second shortest commute in the nation. So we're blessed with like the expectation that like you drive 20 minutes and you're where you need to be, not what these other big cities have, which is like you drive an hour 20 minutes where you need to be, And if you change that context, enjoy a good book on tape, and make some phone calls, there's really not that tyranny of distance you really think. And that's why these communities need to work together. And we'll talk more about what that may look like.
Want to get your thoughts now on your vision that each of you have when you think of the corridor of Milwaukee to Madison, the MadWaukee corridor. This is MadWaukee 2050. So looking 25 years into the future, what's your vision of how this corridor is going to develop, and what are the greatest opportunities there? But what are the biggest challenges to that vision?
Bring me
to a
quarter century from now.
Yes.
I don't even know what a quarter century in the past looks like at this point. So, going into the future here, I think to Dale's point, right? It's the intent. You know, we need to have intent when we're looking at what the growth and development is with the MadWaukee corridor. So I think one thing to look at for sure is the housing, and Thrive has done a very good job with their Live Local Development Fund with their multifamily fund they have. But as we look at Waukesha County and Dane County, what we've seen and what continues to happen, right, is individuals get priced out. So there's a higher availability to have the middle housing within Jefferson County and expand on those things. So what we'll see is more of the entry level, maybe not entry level, early career individuals that are looking for communities to grow a family, to start a family, and have those downtowns that are very quaint and offer them all the services and amenities. That's.
Yeah, I think there's two huge trends happening in our economy which impact this relationship. The first trend is a convergence of industries, and I'll talk about that. And the second one is the exponential increase in complexity in our economy. Let me unpack both those. So when I talk about divergence, is when you're talking about food and beverage now, you're talking about manufacturing. If you go into a food and beverage spot, it looks very, very similar to a manufacturing operation as far as the systems, the processes, the robotics, the automation, right? So there's a convergence there. That's what I mean by that. Information technology. We're at MMAC and MSED. We don't talk about information technology anymore as a sector, because if you are in food and beverage, if you're in manufacturing, if you're in financial services, go down the list. If you don't think you're an information technology CEO and you're a leader of one of those industries, you should not be the CEO. So you'd rather be Madison's information technology economy, an IP-based economy, or Milwaukee's manufacturing economy, or Jefferson's economy with a lot of strength in food and beverage. There's a convergence of all those industries that make it look a lot similar. Now, at the same time, I'll say this, is that as we look at, fascinating article today on the difference like fusion and fission and nuclear, and you talk about all the different types of the economy, how it's grown, and jobs that are available today that we had no idea were jobs 10, 15, 20 years ago. And we don't even know 25 years from now what the new economy will look like. And so I think when you looked at like M7 when it was created, there was a lot of business leaders who say, well, wait a second, so you're recruiting companies here to compete with me? Like, why are you bringing in other businesses to compete with me? But we know in a global economy is that most of these companies are not competing with each other. Is that they're so complex, this economy is so complex, is they bring a uniqueness in their product and their attributes that are not cannibalizing the business market. And we also realize that wealth is created, not divided. And so what 25 years from now, don't know what it looks like, but I'll tell you what it looks like is that the tyranny of distance of a 1 hour, 20-minute commute it's going to be one corridor. And you have to look at it that way too, because as we look at, when you do economic development, one of the things that those companies are looking at is purely demographics. How many people do you have, and with the number of people you have, what are their skill sets? And so one of the reasons that we were successful in our pitches when you look at the corridor between Northern Illinois and Milwaukee is because we have pitched that Chicago Metro is a commuting distance for people, and we could pull that labor pool up to our area. And I think we need to do the same when we look to the west, is that both regions should look at and say, hey, here's the circle, and within a 80-minute commute, all these metros are areas where you can recruit talent.
I want to turn the conversation to infrastructure, specifically talking about, transportation infrastructure and power infrastructure and what we have for the region for this corridor to reach its potential. And I have a specific question from the audience that relates to this, so I'll just go right to that. An audience member said, I commute from Lake Mills to Pewaukee. Are there initiatives to promote I-94 to a 3-lane interstate? So we know it, I believe it, was it Delafield to Deerfield, I think, if I remember, where it narrows down to 2 lanes. So I want to talk about that. Is there any talk that you guys are aware of expanding I-94 to 3 lanes all the way through? And then we can speak more about just the transportation and power infrastructure in general of the corridor and what we need.
Has the chamber had involvement on the advocacy for those efforts?
Yeah, so we're right now our target is to do the east-west between, and you got, I mean, if you drive it, you know it. Is every day you get through and you zip right through the zoo interchange, and then you stop and you wait to get to the bottleneck, and then you get where they finish up the Marquette interchange, and then you take off again, right? So that's, by the way, that's a productivity problem. That's when we talk about MMAC, we have 3 pillars. It's growth, talent, and livability. That's a growth problem because it's a drag on productivity for your time and your part of the workforce. It's a drain on getting beer out of market with and other manufacturers. So that needs to be fixed. That's our number 1 priority. I have not heard about making those lanes 3 lanes each way yet, but I don't know how much talk was about making the additional 4th lane between Northern Illinois and Milwaukee, but as that economic growth happened, it was just very clear that had to happen. So I would say, we got to have more economic growth happen. If that is justified through travel counts, I'm sure that there'd be a investment there. But right now, let's get the east-west done.
But I think, have you guys had conversations about any passenger rail as far as transportation from, Milwaukee, Madison, even north? Has that been? No.
What about any other, there's been a number of road improvements within Jefferson County over the years. I think several of those towns now have bypasses. Any general thoughts on the Jefferson County road infrastructure?
Well, I think with increased growth, right, the county roads, the municipal roads are definitely going to need to be enhanced. I think 26 and 94, I think those are, to the point of that question, right? I mean, I was having lunch, and what kind of came up in that conversation was, man, I wish that it was a 6-lane highway. So, I mean, these are things that people have thought about and continue to think about. But as far as, as we see this continued growth, especially on the housing side and, the truck traffic with the manufacturing and things of that nature, those roadways are going to need to be enhanced.
How about power? With major manufacturing expansions, particularly within Jefferson County, and the energy needs of those operations, is this corridor adequately on We Energy's on their map? Are they planning to provide the infrastructure needed there? What's the status on the power?
I'm glad I have
availability?
Deb within earshot, because most of Jefferson County is served by Alliant, not We. It's We Energies?
And WPPI.
And WPPI, okay. I mean, everything we hear from We Energies, and we had these conversations with We Energies saying, hey, we're giving a lot of customers. I mean, if you look at Microsoft alone, Microsoft's energy pull alone will be more than the entire city of Madison. And there's other projects that we're going to be announcing soon, which will be billion-dollar investments in that area as well. And we've talked to We Energy saying, where are we at? Are you able to provide it? And the answer has been yes. It's not going to be easy, but yes. And so I think it's a project-by-project basis as far as what We Energies could do. And that's part of the reason we do is we recruit companies, we have conversations, and then we facilitate those conversations with the energy company saying, what can you do and what time frame can you do it?
And I think it's having those conversations early too, right? I mean, that's always important. So there's, if there's vacant, green space, right? Having those conversations relatively early on with the power companies of what is their available capacity, and let's say if we have there's available load of, let's say, 3 megawatts, but there's a potential of what it's zoned for and what the intended use is that, it's going to need 10. What does that timeline look like? So we're getting in front of these things prior to being reactive, how we have been very much in the past.
Yeah, and just to be very clear for those that don't know, is that, for example, Microsoft, they actually have a separate agreement with We Energies, and that goes to the Public Service Commission. And the Public Service Commission says, okay, we approve that agreement. And the agreement they actually have is at a premium above the rates you and I pay. And so they understand it's going to take more infrastructure and more investment. And so that's net good for us, because the way energy infrastructure work is there's a lot of fixed cost. And so to have more companies here that are going to be put towards that fixed cost, especially with a agreement that goes above and beyond, like Microsoft has with We Energies, and there's be more of those as more of those types of companies come here. That provides more investment in our energy grid, and the more investment is going to increase capacity. And as we have more capacity, then we could tell more companies to come here.
How about housing development? You know, that's been a very hot topic of late. The struggle I think a lot of communities are having providing affordable housing in an era when construction costs are high and interest rates are higher, and just the demand for housing, the supply is not meeting the demand. We hear that again. Waukesha County has developed to a point that, I mean, there's still open land, but a lot of the best places, the most desirable places in Waukesha County for housing have been taken, or the places that have the infrastructure to support that have been developed. And so I think you're going to see more push into Jefferson County. Is there maybe an opportunity for Jefferson County to provide the affordable housing that the corridor needs, and especially be that place where you can commute either direction? What's your thoughts on the housing situation for the corridor?
Well, land is part of it, but if you look at the housing issue, land is not the top two issues. And the top two issues is the cost of material and the cost of labor. And so, not to get into national policies, but this isn't an issue unique to our metro. There's nowhere you go in this country where they say, you know what we don't have? We don't have any housing issues. We have plenty of housing. I mean, everywhere in the nation is having this housing issue because it's a national issue of supply of labor. And that's why, you know, when I listen to CEOs, they're very excited. They're very pleased that the border crisis has essentially been solved. If you look at the Darien Gap, a 99% reduction in immigration going through that corridor. But now that we have that done, there has to be legal immigration reform to say that we have demographic challenges, and there has to be legal ways to get labor and talent in this market to do things like build houses, because we don't have enough labor. And the other part of that is just simply material. And not to dive into the whole tariff thing, but like that's going to make the situation we sit in right now is going to make housing more unaffordable. And so I see the situation getting exponentially worse because of those two issues as we stand right now, if they're not addressed anytime soon. So I don't know if there's any uniqueness in like, oh, Jefferson County has land, because even if you go to the city of Milwaukee and they'll say, because we actually have, as part of MAC, we have a real estate development firm called Milwaukee Development Corp. We actually own apartment buildings. We buy options on lands. We'll partner with other folks. We're part of the team right now doing the soccer stadium downtown Milwaukee. We could give free land. Like we could give free land from the city. They're willing to give us lots. But if you just take the cost of building with material and labor, the math still doesn't make sense right now.
And I think it's also defining affordable too. You know, the hot topic obviously being workforce housing, and I think, you know, going back to my comments earlier about Jefferson County and their efforts that they've undertaken with their Live Local Development Fund. I mean, some of these local efforts to offset some of these costs for developers, I think is crucial, especially to expand housing. And I think through that, as well as just a municipal approval process too, can help offset some of these costs that we've seen a lot of red tape, and Jefferson County being one of those counties who's done a very proactive job of trying to work with their communities to be able to have the ability to approve housing fast, to get shovels in the ground and buildings erected.
I want to talk about really how you feel this area should grow, again, getting into a big picture vision for the next 25 years. You know, a lot of this corridor we're talking about is still largely rural, small town, and I think there's a lot of excitement about the potential there, but what's the way these areas should grow to capture the economic growth that we need to prosper, yet maintain the quality of life that these communities enjoy and certainly are going to want to retain?
I mean, I don't think there's a big balance there. I mean, I think that your quality of life is probably most likely to be retained if you have economic development. Because you don't have it, demographics and not lack of tax base is not going to work in your favor. So, I mean, I see these like, we want the way it is. Well, the way it is means that you have a declining population, and it means you have deteriorating, I mean, things age, they get old, they go away. I mean, there's very few buildings here today that they were standing 50, 100 years ago. You've got to build with new materials, new energy efficiencies, new standards, accompany, things that are different today than they were before. And so that's not a trade-off. I mean, if you want the way of life you have it now with like restaurants and a library that's functional, like you got to have a tax base, you got to have investment. I don't see anywhere in this area going like all Silicon Valley and being like, hey, a ranch house is now $1 million, and we have plenty of land plenty of opportunities. I think the growth imperative is what has to happen in order to maintain the quality of life that you now have in Southeast Wisconsin and Madison and in between.
Yeah, and I think implementation of smart growth policies, I think that's a very important thing to note, and preserving farmland, right? I mean, that's keeping the rural feel is definitely something that's important of all rural communities and all rural areas. But having those smart growth policies to be able to do that, but also have effective growth. So you're talking about mixed use developments or activating your downtown. There's ways to do it effectively to still keep that rural feel and to be able to still activate your communities.
We talked about talent a little bit earlier. I want to get more into attracting talent to this area. What's the appeal? I do think when you look at the corridor, if you take it as a whole, you have two big cities, you have suburban areas, and you have small town rural areas. You can really offer the gamut of lifestyle. When you think of the corridor and how do we attract talent to this corridor? Do we have what we need?
Well, I think some key important things. I mean, there's a lower cost of living, right? So, I mean, we just talked about the housing aspect. So, but housing is definitely cheaper in the corridor than it is in the city of Madison, for example. We have many universities, right? UW-Madison, Milwaukee, Marquette, and many technical colleges as well that do a very good job of attracting students to their campus, but how do we keep them here? And I think especially in the corridor when we're looking at just a lower cost of living in general, that is definitely a key component of that.
Folks, we're living in heaven. Like, this is the best place to live. And I talk about this all the time. Now, let me take a step back and say, okay, you talk about cities like that we compete with: Salt Lake City, Boston, Phoenix, Indianapolis, Denver. Like, those cities are the big cities in their states. They're also the state capitals. They also have the universities. We just don't have our state capital and our flagship university next to our other research university, and where we have more Fortune 500 companies. But together, they're within this commuting distance, and we have everything. And what is everything? I mean, when I go around the nation, I travel a whole lot. And especially my military service, I get to work with people from around the world, but around the nation as well, and just talk about the life we have, and their jaw drops. I mean, the fact that I live in Brookfield, and I wake up with coyotes and turkeys and deer in my backyard, and I'm 15 minutes away from Major League Baseball, 20 minutes away from the Bucs games, world-class restaurants, Fortune 500 companies, more per capita than the vast majority of cities in our metro. The way people talk to each other, people here, and the approachableness is, a guy like Dave Spano in Chicago. I mean, he's not talking to common people. But Dave Spano in Milwaukee, I mean, the guy's approachable. You talk to anyone you want here. So, I mean, I could go on and on. I'm a 6'7", 225-pound cheerleader from Milwaukee. And I know it's my job, but I think I got the job because I felt that way for a long, long time as far as all the things that we have here to recruit talent. We just got to do a better job of telling it. And I think that, particularly M7, we're giving this some thought, and we're going to come up with a strategic plan here in the fall. I think M7 has done a really, really good job on corporate attraction and retention. I mean, Eli Lilly, largest investment outside of Indiana. Microsoft, largest investment outside of Washington. There'll be more Milwaukee Tool and what they've expanded here, and Komatsu. I could go down the list. I think we got to do a better job on talent, doing it at the tactical level with telling working mothers and fathers in Chicago that Milwaukee or Madison or in between is not a city where you need to choose a career or a family. It is a place where the community and the short commute times and the accessibility to everything is a place where you could have your cake and eat it too. And you could be an involved father, an involved mother, and have a professional career at the highest levels in a city like this, because you're not going to spend 3 hours of your day in a car. And people here value family. And when you say, hey, Dan, I can't stay for the happy hour because I'm going to go to my daughter's track meet, Dan says, you should go to your daughter's track meet, right? That's the kind of community we're in. And so we got to do a better job recruiting talent. This is the best place. I mean, America's the best nation. And in this nation, Wisconsin, this corridor is the best place in this nation to be.
Well, I don't know if we have time for one more question. I don't know if we can top that one. But, we talked about attracting talent, and I think your pitch is similar to attracting companies. Is there anything else beyond what you just said, Dale, and Everett, you can jump in, to attract businesses to this area? Is that the pitch? Is there anything in addition?
I mean, I'll just end with this and turn it over to you guys, is that we have to be intentional about it. That intentionality is growing. There's more intentionality now than there's ever been. And always remember that wealth is not divided. Wealth is created and multiplied exponentially. And so when you have the momentum of relationships and ideas, the intellectual property, the software economy of Madison colliding with the relationships and the manufacturing and the financial services in Milwaukee, wealth will be created out of that. And because of that, and because of intentionality, and thanks for doing this, by the way. This is a great event, great topic. I think you're going to see just continued investment. And just like when I moved to Wisconsin in 2001, and it was pretty much from the border to Milwaukee, it was A&W root beer, the Cheese Castle, some shady adult bookstores, I'm glad they're all gone, and some gas stations. And now that corridor, you see Uline and Amazon and Foxconn and Microsoft and Aurora, and you go on and on. I think in my lifetime, in my 25 years to left, and Everett's 50 years apparently, that you're going to drive that corridor from Milwaukee and through probably Jefferson into Madison. You're going to see the same type of economic development in that corridor.
Everett, final word?
Yeah, I'll echo what Dale just said. Intentionality and partnerships, right? That's key when we're doing corporate attraction.
Sounds good. Well, I want to thank both of you for participating in our conversation today.